Tonight we enter a realm where the laws of the outer world bow to the quiet thunder of inner conviction. Love is not earned, pleaded for, or chased. It is assumed, enthroned, and mirrored. This is not mere motivation. This is creation in motion. In the still chambers of your imagination lies the power to make reality kneel. Stay with me, because in the next moments you'll witness the hidden mechanics of how assuming love with fearless intensity doesn't just change feelings, it bends reality itself. If you've ever wanted to experience love as inevitable, this is your moment. What if reality isn't built by effort, but by assumption? Chibru, what if love bends to the certainty you carry, not the chase you run? Tonight, we don't ask for love, we command it through a sacred rampage of inner certainty. Abrig, my friends. Tonight, I invite you to do something daring, so absolute, that the very fabric of your world must rearrange itself to obey. I speak of the unshakable assumption of love, not as a distant hope, not as a flickering desire, but as a living certainty pulsing within you now. It is the quiet but irresistible stance of one who knows, not guesses, not wishes, knows. When you assume love as already yours, you are not engaging in fantasy, you are taking possession of what has always belonged to you in the unseen. The world out there is but a mirror. It does not create, it reflects. It reflects not your effort, not your longing, but your state of being. And assumption is the gatekeeper of that state. To assume love with firmness is to declare, I am loved, I am chosen, I am adored. And the outer world, though it may seem slow, will begin to rearrange itself to echo that inner decree. I want you to understand this not intellectually, but viscerally. Picture the feeling of being deeply, completely loved, not tomorrow, not in some imagined future, but right now. Feel the warmth of their gaze upon you, the ease in your chest when you know that you are their beloved. Hear their laughter, not as an outsider longing for it, but as the one they laugh with. When this inner scene becomes realer than the outer noise, you have entered the sacred territory of assumption. Many live as beggars in the palace of their own consciousness. They knock upon doors that were never locked. They wait for signs, proof, validation, when the proof waits for them to assume the throne within. If you stand before a mirror and frown, the image frowns back. You would not wait for the reflection to smile first. You must smile, and the mirror obeys instantly. So it is with life. You must assume the feeling of love before life can reflect it. Ibrahim, do not confuse assumption with hope. Hope waits. Assumption acts inwardly. Now, hope says, I wish it will happen. Assumption says, it is done. There is a world of difference between these two postures. One leaves you standing outside the banquet hall, peering through the window. The other walks boldly inside, knowing the seat has already in reserve. When you take your place inwardly, the feast must appear outwardly. Hebrew. Let us be clear, this is not self-deception, this is creation. He is the parent of the scene. When a seed is buried in soil, it does not look like the towering tree it will become, but hidden within that seed is the pattern that commands the soil, the sun, the rain to cooperate until the invisible becomes visible. Your assumption is the seed. When you plant it with conviction and refuse to dig it up with doubt, the world conspires to bring forth its fruit. Many say, but I do not see their love. Their actions contradict my assumption. That is precisely the moment to remain steadfast. If the farmer judged the reality of the harvest by the first day after planting, he would call the field barren and walk away. But the wise one knows what has been sown must come forth in its season. Persist in the assumption, not by straining or forcing, but by dwelling in it, gently, naturally, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Ibrahim, take a moment now, close your eyes, enter the inner chamber where no one else may intrude. There, see yourself not as the seeker, but as the beloved. Let every cell of your being breathe the air of certainty. If you were truly loved right now, how would you walk? How would you speak? How would you rest your head at night? Adopt that posture inwardly. Carry it with you not as a performance, but as truth. Inner movement is the real act of creation. People often ask, how long must I assume before it happens? That question reveals that they have not yet assumed. When you have truly taken the inner state as real, the outer result becomes a mere matter of unfolding time, and your urgency melts away. A pregnant woman does not ask daily if the child will arrive. She knows. Her world is already rearranging itself to welcome the new life. Her body shifts, her plans shift, her conversations shift, all because of an inner knowing. Your assumption of love works in the same way. It is a conception. Once conceived, it grows silently until it is born into form. Do not look to the outer world for confirmation before you assume. That is like waiting for the reflection to change before you alter your face. The outer responds to the inner, never the reverse. This is why the unshakable assumption is so powerful. It stands regardless of appearances. It is not swayed by temporary shadows. It knows that the stagehands of reality are busy behind the curtain, rearranging props, preparing the scene. The lights will rise soon enough. Be able to assume love is not to manipulate another. It is to align with the truth of your being. When you stand in the knowing that you are loved, cherished, and chosen, those who match that frequency are drawn to you. Even those who once seemed distant can appear transformed, not because you bent their will, but because your world has changed, and they now occupy a new role within it. You did not force them, you assumed why. Ourselves into a different reality where love is inevitable. There will be moments when doubt whispers, let it. You do not have to wrestle with the shadow to know the sun is real. Return to the feeling, return to the throne. Each time doubt arises, do not argue with it. Simply reoccupy the state of love. The more often you dwell there, the more natural it becomes. What begins as deliberate practice becomes effortless habitation. In this sacred work, persistence is power. Not persistence in effort, but persistence in inner certainty. The river carves the stone not by force, but by continuous flow. So too, your unwavering assumption wears down the resistance of appearances until reality must yield. This is why it is called unshakable. You cannot build palace on shifting sand. Build your inner world on the rock of certainty. I am loved now. And when storms come, when appearances rage, your inner structure remains unmoved. Understand also that assumption is not dependent on another's awareness. Whether they know it or not, the roles they play in your life adjust to the state you occupy. When you truly embody the feeling of being loved, you may find that conversations change, glances soften, unexpected messages appear. You will witness the invisible hand moving through ordinary events, weaving together a tapestry that reflects your inner stance. This is not reserved for the mystic or the gifted. Every person here has this power, for it is not a technique you borrow. It is your very nature. You are always assuming something, whether consciously or unconsciously. The world you experience now is the harvest of past assumptions. If you do not like the fruit, plant new seeds. Assume deliberately, assume lovingly, assume boldly. A brewery to assume love unshakably is to stop waiting at the gate and step through. It is to stop hoping they will love you one day and to live as the one already loved. And as surely as night follows day, the mirror will bend and the world will echo back your inner decree. Now, having taken your rightful place within, having stood in the unshakable assumption of love, you must understand what follows. There comes a moment when quiet certainty must turn into a sacred rampage, not against the world, not against others, but against every shadow within that dares to contradict the reality you have claimed. This is not a rampage of force, but of absolute inner dominion, where you allow no opposing thought, no whisper of doubt, no trace of insecurity to dictate the atmosphere of your consciousness. There is a holy ferocity that awakens when you decide to no longer entertain the old story. It is as if the kingdom of your inner world has declared war on the imposters, those faint memories, those tired narratives, those habitual emotions that once kept you begging at the gates. When you assume love and refuse to let anything shake that assumption, you enter the battleground not with swords, but with sovereign authority. You say, this is how it is now. And every inner voice that disagrees is dismissed as irrelevant background noise. This rampage is sacred because it does not arise from fear. It arises from the joy of knowing that love is already yours. It is the celebration of your throne being reclaimed. Imagine a king returning to a palace that had been temporarily occupied by unruly servants. He does not ask permission to enter. He walks in, and his very presence reorganizes the hall. The servants fall into place, not because he fought them, but because he embodies authority for it. So it is with you. Once you have assumed love unshakably, your inner world must reflect that authority. This is the moment to become fierce in consciousness, not desperate, fierce. You sweep through your inner corridors and declare, only love speaks here. If a thought arises that says, perhaps they don't love me, you do not negotiate with it. Ye overrule. You remind yourself, not timidly but boldly, they do, it is done. If an old memory surfaces trying to play its tired script of rejection or abandonment, you no longer sit through that play. You bring down the curtain and rewrite the scene. You see, for so long, many have allowed their inner world to be governed by old emotional habits. They have allowed memories to dictate their worth and circumstances to define their standing. But when you assume love and begin this sacred rampage, you become the sole governor of your consciousness. You do not share the throne with fear. You do not debate with insecurity. You do not entertain what-ifs like unwelcome guests. I command the inner realm with unwavering conviction. This rampage is not loud in the outer world. It is thunderous in the inner world. You may look calm on the outside, but inside, you are dismantling every lie that ever suggested you were unloved. You are tearing down every false altar built to doubt. You are ear-flooding your inner space like with the fragrance of certainty. And as you do, the world begins to adjust because reality has no choice but to follow the ruler within. Think of this like the changing of seasons. When spring takes hold, winter cannot resist. The frost melts, the ground softens, the buds appear. Spring does not argue with winter. It simply arrives, and everything else must yield. Your sacred rampage is spring arriving in your consciousness. The cold, brittle doubts that once held their ground begin to dissolve under the warmth of your unwavering stance. At first, this may feel like an intense inward movement. Old patterns may resist. Doubt may knock louder than ever, not because it has gained power, but because it realizes its reign is ending. When you no longer bow to those doubts, they appear frantic. But pay them no reverence. They are like actors who have forgotten the play has changed. Let them perform their final acts, and they will fade when they receive no applause from you. Ibril, the power of this sacred rampage, ease in at your refusal to waver. You are not fighting shadows with shadows. You are standing in light so radiant that darkness loses its shape. When a thought tries to question the reality of your love, you do not retreat into analysis or pleading. You will stand. You return to the feeling of love already secured. You remind yourself, this is not becoming true, it is true now. That unwavering stance is the true rampage. It's the relentless return to the throne every single time something tries to drag you back into the old corridors of lack. There is a rhythm to this. Each time you dismiss an opposing thought and reaffirm your assumption, the structure of your inner world grows stronger. You are not repeating empty affirmations. You are building a fortress of conviction. You are training your consciousness to hold its ground under any appearance. Eventually, the doubts grow weaker, not because you fought them endlessly, but because you consistently refuse to feed them. Let me make this vivid for you. Imagine standing in front of a vast orchestra. For years, this orchestra has played a discordant melody of longing, insecurity, and doubt. You walk in, take the conductor's baton, and announce a new symphony, the sound of being loved. At first, some instruments continue to play the old tune, but you do not adjust to their chaos. You keep conducting the new melody with absolute certainty. Gradually, one by one, the instruments fall in line. The music changes. The entire orchestra bends to your rhythm. This is exactly what happens within. Thoughts, emotions, memories, and beliefs have played their tunes for years, sometimes centuries through patterns passed down. When you begin this rampage, you are not politely suggesting a new song. You are commanding it. You are saying, this is the music now, love is the score, nothing else plays here. And as this inner symphony shifts, your world responds. People who once seemed distant may appear attentive. Situations that once echoed emptiness may suddenly reflect warmth. Paths you never noticed before open like hidden doors. But all of this happens after the inner rampage, not before. You do not wait for the orchestra to change on its own. You change it by standing unwavering at the center. Some may wonder, isn't this exhausting? No. What is exhausting is living at the mercy of doubt, constantly trying to patch leaks in a sinking ship. The rampage is not frantic work, it is work of sovereign action. It is the moment you stop mopping the floor during a storm and instead close the window. It is the shift from chasing proof to embodying truth. When you live in this way, even the smallest contradiction in the outer world loses its power to shake you. A message delayed, a look misread, a silence extended. These no longer send you spiraling. You have trained your inner world to hold its stance. You have built momentum, and that momentum is sacred. And something beautiful happens. When this inner rampage continues long enough, it becomes natural. What began as deliberate assertion becomes your baseline. You no longer have to remind yourself constantly. You simply for the beloved, and everything within obeys that identity. Doubt may occasionally knock, but it finds no doorway left open. The throne is occupied, the kingdom aligned, the music harmonious. This is the fiery heart of transformation. Assumption plants the seed. Sacred rampage protects and nourishes it until the seed breaks through the soil. It is the unwavering refusal to let the weeds of doubt choke your harvest. And once the rampage is fully embodied, you realize that the outer world bends not to those who beg, but to those who, and once that momentum begins to hum through you, once the rampage has cleared the inner corridors of every lingering echo of doubt, a stage emerges, a silent, luminous stage within you. This is the inner theater, where the drama of your love does not begin when someone texts you, looks at you, or confesses their feelings. It begins behind the closed curtains of imagination. It is theater that reality first bows. Everything that later appears in the world must first be rehearsed, felt, and known within. Close your eyes for a moment and sense it. That sacred stage where you are both playwright and actor, director and audience. It is not an empty hall. It is vibrant, alive, responsive. Every image you impress upon it, every scene you allow to unfold becomes a living script that reality will eventually perform. The outer world does not invent the plot. It merely follows the lines you have already written here. This is where the true drama of love takes shape, not in anxious waiting, but in conscious creation. When you step into this theater, you do not enter timidly. You enter with the authority you claimed through your unshakable assumption and your sacred rampage. You stand at the center of this inner stage and say, this is how it unfolds. And as you do, you craft scenes, not vague, desperate daydreams, but vivid, natural, compelling acts of fulfilled love. You imagine as though the desire has already been satisfied, as though the applause has already erupted. You do not ask, will this happen? You feel as happening now. Brew. This theater, time dissolves. You do not wait for a future. You step into the reality where the future is already present. If you desire their love, then in this theater you nowhere, it is yours. You hear their voice speaking to you with affection. You see their eyes meeting yours with ease and warmth. You feel their presence around you, not as a far-off hope, but as something real, tactile, immediate. And the more vivid and effortless the scene becomes, the more powerfully it shapes the outer reflection. Do not underestimate the subtlety of this work. Many try to force imagination like hammering a nail. But this is not labor in the outer sense. It is delicate mastery. When you imagine, you are not pushing against reality. You are softly bending were it. You are weaving threads into a tapestry that the outer world will later display. You are the sculptor shaping invisible clay. The stage may appear silent, but every inner whisper, every imagined touch, every envisioned look carries weight. Understand this deeply. The outer world cannot resist the inner play for long. The scene you persistently and lovingly inhabit will outpicture itself. It may weave through a series of events that your rational mind cannot predict, but it will arrive. This is why the theater of imagination is so sacred. It is not idle fantasy. It is rather the birthplace of factful. Every great love story begins here, not in pleading for attention, but in crafting the feeling of already being adored, already being chosen, already being home. Ibroki and this theater demands consistency. You cannot step onto its stage one night and then abandon the script at the first sign of contrary evidence. Just as an actor rehearses until the lines become second nature, so must you dwell in your scene until it feels it was inevitable still. This is not repetition for the sake of habit. It is immersion until the imagined becomes the only thing that feels real. When that happens, the outer world has no choice but to conform. The beauty of this theater is that our aid obeys feeling, not words. For you could recite 1,000 affirmations without feeling and nothing would move. But if you sit quietly and let yourself truly feel what it's like to be held, loved, cherished, desired, even for a few moments, you set forces into motion that ripple far beyond what your senses can detect. Feeling is the language of this inner realm, and when you speak it fluently, reality listens. There is a certain lightness required here. The theater does not respond well to anxious clutching. If you sit in the audience of your own mind, worrying whether the play will be performed tomorrow or next week, you have left the director's chair. But when you calmly inhabit the role, why? When you act and feel as the beloved in this inner space, the performance outside becomes a matter of unfolding time, not doubt. Think of it like a rehearsal before a grand premiere. No one doubts that opening night will come. The cast simply refines their roles until it does. You too refine the feeling. You return night after night or moment after moment during the day to your private stage. Perhaps you lie on your bed, and as you drift towards sleep, you place yourself in that fulfilled scene. You hear them whisper, "I love you." You feel their hand resting against yours. You sense the ease, the completeness. You let that feeling either sink into your bones. And as you do, something profound happens. You cease longing for the scene to come because you are already living itofais inwardly. Some will say, but isn't this just pretending? No, pretending implies knowing something isn't real. This is different. This is choosing the away real causer, of experience. The outer world may lag, but the inner world is always the seed. A gardener does not call planting a seed pretending to have a tree. The seed fits the tree in embryo. Mere pretense. It is the origin. As you craft these scenes, pay close attention to naturalness. Do not strain for elaborate details that feel forced. Choose moments that feel inevitable. Perhaps it's the way they look at you across a room, the sound of their voice saying your name, or the quiet sense of being wrapped in their affection. Simplicity often carries more power than grandiose visions, because simplicity allows the feeling to flow unhindered. When the scene feels normal, well, there, you know it has been impressed. And once you've impressed it, you do not go digging it up to check if it's working. You rest in the knowing that the theater has already performed the act in the unseen. The outer stage is merely catching up. Just as a play performed in rehearsal will later be performed before the public, your inner act will inevitably find its stage. When you return to waking life after an inner scene, carry that feeling lightly like a fragrance. You do not need to prove anything to anyone. The fragrance itself alters your posture, your expression, your energy. And people respond to that without knowing why. They feel the shift because you have shifted at the level where reality begins. This inner theater is where the sacred rampage finds its egg-like artistry at D. The rampage cleared the ground, the theater builds the palace. Here you are not battling doubt, you have already silenced it. Now you are always creating a with elegance, with clarity, with quiet power. And when the outer world begins to reflect these inner plays, when conversations, gestures, encounters unfold exactly as they were once rehearsed, you will know that the inner stage is not imagination's playground, it is reality's blueprint. Night after night, scene after scene, you live the love inwardly until the world cannot help but mirror it. There is no pleading, no chasing, no proving, only knowing and acting the we within. You have playwright of your experience, and life, ever the obedient performer, takes your script and plays it out on the grand stage of the physical world. And as the scenes within grow more vivid, as your inner theater begins to feel more real than the world outside, something remarkable begins to unfold within you. The longing that once carried a sharp edge begins to soften, transform, and finally dissolve. What was once a hunger turns into a radiant fullness here, a quiet joy that does not depend on appearances. This is the alchemy of emotion, the transmutation of desire into the living feeling of fulfillment. In this sacred process, emotion is not an obstacle. It is the raw material CV. The longing you once felt, the ache of wanting love, is not meant to be suppressed or denied. It is meant to be transformed, just as heat and melt metal into a new shape. Feeling, when directed consciously, can reshape the entire structure of your inner world. You are not trying to get rid of emotion. You are elevating it from craving to having. When you first desired love, perhaps it burned like a distant star, beautiful but unreachable. Your thoughts circled it. Your heart yearned for it. Your actions were pulled toward it like tides. But now, standing in the authority of assumption and commanding your inner stage, that distant star descends. It no longer shines from afar. It rises within you. The desire ceases to be a reaching. It becomes easy possession. It will feel is already yours. And in that moment, the emotional chemistry within you changes entirely. This is why emotion must be felt deliberately. Many run from their feelings or drown in them. Few learn to shape or wear them. When longing arises, instead of feeding it with stories of lack, why isn't it here yet? Why haven't they said this? Why did they act that way? You redirect it. You take that emotional energy and move it inward, shaping it into the feeling of already being loved. You are not denying it. You are transmuting with it. Imagine a musician taking a chaotic noise and turning it into a symphony. The noise was not discarded. It was refined. So it is with longing. You take the ache and bring it into your inner theater. There, instead of letting it scream of absence, you allow it to sing of fulfillment. You shift your inner dialogue from, I want them to love me, to, I am cherished, I am chosen, I am secure in love. And as you do this sincerely, not mechanically, you begin to feel the warmth of that reality flow through your being. Emotion is the fuel of this creative journey. Without it, imagination is dry, mechanical, lifeless. But when you marry, why are we feeling to the scenes you create? The play comes alive. The outer world responds not merely to mental pictures, but to the emotional charger behind them. A scene imagined with cold detachment carries little power, but a scene infused with the living feeling of fulfillment shakes the unseen into motion. Many misunderstand emotion, thinking they must control it like a tyrant. But emotion is not the enemy. Misdirected emotion is. Unexamined longing can harden into despair or obsession. But when you catch it early, when you hold it in your awareness without judgment, you can reshape it deliberately. Take that moment when your heart aches for their presence. Instead of spiraling into doubt, close your eyes. Mirror that inner transformation. People sense it. You radiate something different, something stable, confident, magnetic. It is not the energy of one who is searching, but of one who has found. Fibru. Think of a child pretending to be a king. If the child simply says the words, I am a king, without feeling it, the play is hollow. But if the child steps fully into the feeling way, walks with regal bearing, speaks with quietly for that moment, the child, the king, the feeling makes it real within. And the more consistently that feeling is held, the more it shapes the outer environment. You are doing the same with love. You are stepping from the emotional posture of a seeker into the emotional posture of the beloved. This shift is not about suppressing what arises. If tears come, let them come. But even tears can be reframed. Instead of crying from lack, let the tears fall as though from overwhelming gratitude that the love you desired is now emotional story you attach to it. If you give it the story of fulfillment, the emotion aligns with that story. You may notice moments when old emotional patterns try to reassert themselves. Perhaps you wake one morning and feel the familiar tug of nothing has changed. Do not panic. This is not failure. It is the old emotional habit knocking. Instead of indulging it, ye to the inner scene. Let the feeling of fulfillment wash over you again, not through force, but through exertile return. Each returns the new emotional baseline. Over time, the old ache loses its grip like a fire that dwindles when it's no longer fed. This emotional alchemy is the heartbeat therapy of creation. Thought alone moves mountains, emotion fused with inner conviction does. When you step into the feeling of being loved, cherished, chosen, your nervous system, your energy, your posture all change. You are no longer walking as someone hoping for love. You are walking as someone who is already adored, and the world, like a mirror, adjusts its reflection to match. Do not underestimate the quiet power of simply feeling fulfilled or V. Many rush to manipulate outer circumstances because they do not trust the invisible work. But the invisible is always the root. When the emotional atmosphere within you shifts permanently to fulfillment, you no longer need to chase, beg, or prove. Love finds you because you have become the embodiment of it. It is here that longing transforms from a restless search into a creative pulse oscillatory. You no longer resist it, you direct it. You use emotion, the sculptor uses clay, molding it, shaping it, breathing life into the scene you have written on the inner stage. You no longer allow emotions to run wild, nor do you cage them. You either them gently but firmly toward the state of the wish fulfilled. And when this emotional alchemy becomes your natural rhythm, everything changes. Conversations flow differently, interactions soften. You find yourself in moments that feel strangely familiar because you have already felt them before. It is not surprising you. It is catching up ray to the emotional state you have maintained. You have taught your heart to dwell in love, and life cannot help but mirror the heart's dwelling place. This is not fantasy, it is law. Emotion is the magnetic current that draws form to feeling. When you persist in the feeling of being loved, reality reorganizes itself to comply. What once felt far away begins to approach you with ease, not because you forced it, but because you became it emotionally first. The longing that once drove you outward has been turned inward, refined, and returned as radiant certainty. And as this radiant certainty settles into your being, something subtle but unmistakable begins to happen around you. The world, which once seemed rigid and unmoving, begins to bend, not through struggle, but through the quiet authority of your inner stance. Reality, like a mirror, does not resist your image, it reflects it. And when the image within is transformed, the mirror must comply. Be brew. This is one of the most misunderstood principles. People look into the mirror of life, see a reflection they dislike, and then attempt to change the mirror. They plead with it, argue with it, polish its surface, hoping that the reflection will improve. But the mirror is innocent. It can only reflect what stands before it. If you frown, it frowns back. If you smile, it smiles. If you approach it with the consciousness of being loved, chosen, secure, it will return that image with unwavering fidelity. To try to change the reflection without changing yourself is as futile as scolding a mirror for showing you your own face. The moment you shift inwardly, the outer begins to rearrange itself. Sometimes this happens swiftly with startling clarity. Other times it unfolds gently like dawn breaking through the night. But whether sudden or gradual, the law is the same. The outer world bends to the inner conviction. When your assumption of love becomes unwavering, when your inner theater is alive with scenes of fulfillment and your emotions hum with certainty, the world has no choice but to echo that state. This is why chasing outer evidence is so exhausting. It is like running after your own reflection in the mirror, hoping to catch it. The moment you stop chasing, turn inward, and embody for what you seek, the reflection follows you effortlessly. If you want the world to smile, you must first smile within. If you want love to appear around you, you must first while stand in love aware within. Consider how light bends through a prism. The light itself does not resist. It simply follows the shape of the prism. Your consciousness is the prism through which life flows. Change the shape of the prism and the light must bend accordingly. When you alter the inner state, life bends through it to produce a new pattern, a new reflection, a knee. Sequence of events is not personal, it is natural. When you fully grasp this, you stop blaming the mirror. You stop waiting for someone else's behavior to prove your worth. You stop demanding that circumstances validate your desire. Instead, you become the causator, and the world, faithful servant that it is, rearranges itself around you. This is not arrogance, this is creative responsibility. You are not at the mercy of appearances. Appearances are at the mercy of the image you hold within. And what is astonishing is how ordinary events begin to carry it or extraordinary significance when the mirror bends. A conversation you once would have dismissed now unfolds with a perfect subtlety that aligns with your inner scene. A chance encounter becomes a step in the unfolding play you wrote in your inner theater. People seem to speak lines you rehearsed in silence. Life ceases to feel random. It becomes choreographed, not by fate imposed from outside, but by the state decay you now occupy. Many become impatient in this stage. They look at the mirror, see that it hasn't yet caught up fully, and start to doubt. But think of how a mirror responds when you move. There is a tiny gap, infinitesimal perhaps, but the reflection always follows quo. It cannot do eyes. Your task is not to shake the mirror, but to hold the state. If you move into love and remain there, the reflection must come. It is law. This is where persistence takes on its true meaning. Persistence is not repeating words desperately. It is remaining unmoved inwardly, even when appearances have not yet shifted. It is standing before the mirror calmly, knowing that the image must align. It is resisting the temptation to run back into the old emotional postures of doubt and lack. When the mirror shows a temporary shadow, you don't argue with it. You simply remember, this is not the cause, I am. And soon you begin to witness the bending. Perhaps it starts with subtle gestures. Someone's tone softening, a message arriving unexpectedly, a coincidence that feels too precise to be mere chance. You will feel a quiet recognition. There it is. The mirror is turning. And once it starts to turn, it gains momentum, for reality loves to follow the line you draw inwardly. There is a beauty in this stage. You stop wrestling with appearances. You no longer look to others for proof, because you carry the proof within. You no longer measure by what the outer shows you in every moment. You measure it by the stability of your inner state. Inner stance is firm. You know that the mirror must reflect it, whether now or soon. This quiet confidence is not passive resignation. It is creative mastery. Shibru. Imagine standing at the edge of a still lake. The water reflects your image perfectly. If you are agitated, your movements ripple across the surface and the reflection distorts. But when you stand still, calm, clear in your identity, the reflection stabilizes and mirrors you flawlessly. This is what happens when you cease struggling with appearances. You stop throwing emotional stones into the lake and the reflection sharpens. Sometimes reality bends through channels you could not have predicted. The person you love may show up in ways you never scripted consciously. Circumstances may weave themselves into a tapestry so intricate that your rational mind could never have planned it. But that is the beauty of this mirror. It does not need your micromanagement. It only needs your inner certainty way. You do not have to know how the world will bend. You only have to remain as the causator, and the effect will unfold with precision. Hebrew. And when you begin to live this way, a quiet reversal occurs. You no longer fear appearances. You no longer cling to signs like a drowning man clings to a log. Signs become delightful confirmations, not lifelines. You look at the mirror with calm eyes, knowing that what it shows is merely the shadow of your inner stance. If something appears contrary, you don't panic. You return inward, adjust the stance, and let the reflection catch up. This is the true bending of reality, not through struggle, but through stillness of knowing. The mirrors, when you bend inwardly, the world responds when you inhabit your chosen state consistently. The person you love, the circumstances you desire, The moments you've rehearsed, they are drawn to you not because you chase them, but because your inner image has changed the fire, and reality is compelled to follow. This is why the emotional alchemy is essential. If the feeling within is one of lack, the mirror reflects lack. If the feeling is one of fulfillment, the mirror reflects fulfillment. The world is your mirror, nothing more, nothing less. When you see it this way, blame evaporates, impatience fades. You stop demanding that the reflection move first. You accept that the movement must begin within you, and when it does, reality bends like light through glass. And as this bending becomes more apparent, your trust in the unseen deepens. You no longer rely on surface evidence because the mirror has proven itself faithful. You become anchored in the awareness that every outer scene is but the echo of your inner play. The person who once felt distant now moves in rhythm with the story you have lived inwardly. Circumstances once stubborn become pliable. Life becomes the obedient reflection of the image aura you hold. And as life begins to mirror this new image with quiet precision, you come to recognize something even more profound. Before the visible rearrangement ever takes place, there is always a silent movement within you. It is this unseen shift that precedes every visible change. What seems to happen suddenly in the outer world is only the delayed echo of an invisible act that occurred within your own consciousness. The physical is never the beginning, it is always the result. Hebrew. Think of the moment before dawn, the sky, dark, the world still. And yet the light is already on its way. No one sees it yet, but its arrival is certain. The birds sense it before. Human eyes do. The air shifts subtly, the horizon prepares. So it is with the unseen inner shift. Long before anyone else notices, long before circumstances rearrange, something deep within you changes. A new certainty takes root. A quiet knowing replaces restless effort. You walk through your days aware that the light has already broken fire, even if the sky around you remains dim. This is where many falter because they mistake the silence for stagnation. They look around and say, nothing is happening, not realizing that the greatest movements are often invisible. A seed buried beneath the soil gives no outward sign of growth in its early days, yet beneath the surface, roots are forming, structures are emerging, the unseen is preparing to outburst into form roar. When you hold your assumption with steadiness, when you persist in the inner scene and sustain the emotional reality of fulfillment, you have already set the cause in motion. The outer must follow, but it will follow in its own sequence, just as the harvest follows the planting in perfect order. This unseen shift is not something you need to manufacture through strain. It happens the moment you truly accept the inner reality as fact. You may notice it quietly one day, a calmness where anxiety used to be, a settled confidence where doubt once whispered. You realize that you no longer feel the urge to check for signs, to push circumstances into shape, to demand proof. It's as if something has clicked into place, not loudly, but with the soft certainty of a door closing perfectly in its frame. That is the real moment of creation again. Everything that happens afterward is merely the unfolding. You may find yourself smiling at moments that once would have made you uneasy. A message delayed no longer shakes you. A moment of silence no longer triggers fear. You simply know. The world might still present remnants of the old reflection, but your reaction has changed completely, and that change in reaction is itself a sign that the inner shift has occurred. Before, you might have scrambled to fix the outer. Now, you rest inwardly knowing that reality is catching up. This invisible transition is where your faith is tested, not in the sense of hoping against evidence, but in if you remaining loyal to the inner conviction despite outer delay. You are no longer swayed by appearances because you understand that appearances are not primary. You have learned that everything seen is born from the unseen. You have become attuned to the subtle moment when the state is occupied so fully that you no longer need reassurance. You know it is done, not because you saw evidence, but because your being has shifted. And then, almost inevitably, the world begins to reorganize itself around this invisible change. It may come in ways your rational mind never predicted. A conversation that seemed unlikely takes place with effortless ease. A person's demeanor softens without explanation. Circumstances align like pieces of a puzzle that have been waiting for your inner click to fall into place. But notice the outer shift Devi follows, it does not lead. Hebrew, when you understand this, patience becomes natural, not forced. You stop pacing the floor, wondering when it will happen. You begin to live as though it had already hasavi, and in truth it has within. The delay between the inner assumption and the outer manifestation is simply the time it takes for the unseen to crystallize into form. No farmer digs up seeds daily to check if they are sprouting. He waters, he trusts, he tends to the soil, knowing that the invisible work is happening even when the surface looks unchanged. In this stage, your role is to aid protect the inner shift here. Doubts might try to creep in, like weeds attempting to choke young plants. You do not panic. You simply return to the inner certainty, remembering that the cause has already been set. You tend to your state as a gardener tends to the soil. Consistent, gentle, unwavering. You don't demand that the harvest come overnight because you understand the order of things. First the blade, then the ear, then the full grain. And something beautiful happens as you continue to live from this unseen certainty. Your emotional climate stabilizes. Where once there were storms of longing and waves of doubt, now there is a quiet, steady glow. You no longer swing between hope and fear. You rest in a kind of unshakable stillness not because the outer world has changed dramatically yet, but because you have changed inwardly in a way that cannot be reversed. You have crossed a threshold that others may not see, but you feel it deeply. It is often in this silent interval that the most precise adjustments in the outer world are taking place. People are being moved, situations rearranged, paths opened. The very structure of reality is aligning itself to reflect your new state. You may not hear the gears turning, but they are. Just as a house is constructed behind the scaffolding before the facade is revealed, the unseen work is preparing the stage for your scene to unfold. And when the moment comes, it often arrives quietly. There is rarely a trumpet announcing it. Instead, it slips into your life so naturally that you might almost forget that you once longed for it. You find yourself in a conversation, in a moment, in a shared glance, and suddenly you realize this is it. The inner scene has stepped forward onto the outer stage. What once was rehearsed in imagination now stands before you in flesh and circumstance. The key is that this visible arrival here is never the cause of your certainty. It is the Kage effect, the cause, that quiet moment when you accepted deeply and without strain that love was already yours. The effect is the world rearranging to match that inner acceptance. If you understand this, you will no longer give outer appearances the power to dictate your inner state. You will hold your stance regardless of what the senses say, because you know that the senses are simply catching up to the yoku, invisible decision fear already made within. Hebrew. This understanding frees you from urgency. You stop rushing life. You stop demanding signs at every turn. You know that the invisible movement has already set everything in motion. Just as a train, once set on its tracks, must eventually arrive at the station, so too must your outer world arrive at the scene you have already claimed inwardly. Your task is not to run along the tracks to hurry it. Your task is to remain AF aligned with the destination way. This is where manifestation ceases to feel like effort and becomes wordia natural unfolding aware. You no longer live in tension between desire and reality. You live in the awareness that the unseen is always moving first, that every visible effect begins as an invisible cause, and that your inner state is the master key. You walk through the world differently, you speak differently, you love differently, and reality, ever the faithful mirror, follows your lead. And when you begin to live in this quiet mastery, something remarkable happens. You stop reaching outward for love as though it were a distant prize, and you begin to aid or command it from within, not through force, through arrogance, but through the serene authority of one who knows their place as the source, not the seeker. Love is no longer a hope hanging in the air. It becomes the natural outflow of the state you occupy. You no longer whisper desperate questions like, will they love me? Because you stand in the consciousness that says, I am loved. And from this stance, Reality has no choice but to yet say that love back to you through faces and moments that align with your assumption. You see, love does not chase. Love stands. Love does not bargain or plead. Love knows itself and waits calmly for the world to catch up. This is the heart of living from the end, not wishing, not half believing, but assuming the role of the one who already has what they once sought. You become like the sun, radiating steadily, not chasing after planets, but holding them effortlessly through your gravitational certainty. When you embody the consciousness of being loved, the world reorganizes to reflect that identity. People are drawn, conversations soften, situations harmonize, not because you have twisted anyone's will, but because each your being has declared a new law. The love you command is not loud. It does not need to convince anyone. It simply exists like a mountain standing unmoved by passing winds. And others, consciously or not, respond to that stance. They feel it in your presence, in your silence, in the way you look at them. Not from a place of lack, but from fullness. There is a subtle but unmistakable difference between someone who seeks to be chosen and someone who knows they already area. One reaches out nervously, the other emanates a quiet power that bends the environment. This is why chasing love often pushes it further away. Chasing implies separation. It declares, I do not have it yet, and the mirror of life faithfully reflects that absence. But when you stand inwardly as the beloved, when you wear that identity as naturally as you wear your own name, the mirror reflects love without resistance. There is no pleading, no convincing, no strategizing, just the effortless unfolding of what you already accepted as true. It is here that the earlier stages, assumption, the sacred rampage, the inner theater, the emotional alchemy, the bending of reality, and the unseen shift, come together into his one living statement. The state of the one who commands love. Not commands others, but commands the mirror by standing before it with unwavering self-conviction. You no longer need to rehearse scenes endlessly. You become the scene itself. You no longer need to check if the world is responding. You know it must, because it is law. When you assume this stance, you stop treating love as if it's a rare visitor you must impress. Instead, you recognize it as Awaken atmosphere that flows from you. And atmospheres are powerful. People step into it and feel something they cannot quite name. Safety, warmth, inevitability. They feel the pull with the state you occupy. Without saying a word, you broadcast the message, I am loved. I am chosen. I am the center of a story already written. And reality, ever obedient, begins to play its part accordingly. It's like tuning a radio. Before, you may have been twisting the dial endlessly, trying to catch the right frequency. But once you find it, the music flows effortlessly. You don't chase the sound, you become the station. And love, like music, simply plays through the channel of your state. When you live as the loved, you are broadcasting on a frequency that calls everything aligned with that truth into manifestation. You stop doubting the signal, you know the music will play. You might find that people begin to behave differently around you, not because you've manipulated them, but because the ayat story they are stepping into has changed for. In your old state, lines matched uncertainty, distance, perhaps rejection. In your new state, they naturally fall into the roles that your inner conviction has scripted. You may notice a shift in their eyes, their tone, their timing. Life becomes a play where you are both the author and the actor, and others respond not to your words but to your state. This is why a true winner authority say is so powerful. It doesn't ask for permission to be loved. It or assumes the role of the beloved for you. It doesn't wait for signs. It creates them. It doesn't oscillate between hope and fear. It rests in knowing. When you stand in this authority, even temporary appearances that seem contrary lose their power to shake you. You understand that they are only remnants of an old broadcast. Static that fades as the new signal grows stronger. And what's extraordinary is that the love you command is not limited to one specific person. When you occupy the state of being loved, You awaken a thou-magnetic quality or a ray that draws forth love from every direction. Strangers treat you differently. Opportunities arrive with a grace you did not force. Your presence becomes saturated with the certainty of love, and the world responds like iron filings to a magnet. The particular expression of love you desire, whether from a specific individual or through new unforeseen channels, comes as a natural effectuity, not as a forced outcome. But here is the key. Commanding love is not about dominance. It's about orthro alignment tori. You are not issuing demands outwardly. You are issuing them inwardly to the mirror. You are standing before life and saying with quiet authority, this is who I am. And because reality cannot contradict your sustained identity, it conforms. This is the deepest form of surrender, not to the outer world, but to the inner truth of your inner assumption. You stop living. Love is a prize to be earned. You stop negotiating with life as if you are unworthy. You stop trying to persuade anyone to see your value. Instead, you become the value HOI, and the world reflects it back. You carry yourself differently. Your eyes hold certainty. Your voice carries assurance. Your movements lose their anxious edges. There is a rhythm to your being that speaks louder than any words. And in this rhythm, the story unfolds without strain. You are no longer trying to make love happen. You are allowing it to mirror what you've already accepted as true. When doubts arise, you return to the stance. When appearances delay, you remain unmoved. When others question, you smile inwardly because you know the mirror cannot defy the image. This is not blind faith. It is intimate understanding array of the law by which your reality is shaped. In time, you look back and realize how much energy you once spent chasing, convincing, waiting. You see how much of that was born from the belief that love was outside of you. But now you live in the recognition that love flows from you, say, and everything else simply reflects it. The specific relationship, the cherished moments, the warm gestures, they are the echoes, not the source. This is the sacred authority of the one who assumes love and they feel its reality. Benduo, you no longer fight for a place in someone else's story. You no longer fear being overlooked. You all stand in your story and life adjusts its script accordingly. The beloved does not wonder if love will come. The beloved will nostre, it is already present. The world cannot help but play along with such certainty. For reality itself is shaped by the state you dare to occupy completely. When you fully understand that love is not something to chase, but something to assume, your entire world begins to respond with precision. The moment you accept the inner reality as already fulfilled, you shift from seeker to creator. Your imagination becomes the stage, your emotions the script, and your unwavering assumption the force that bends reality itself. Love flows to you not because you begged for it, but because you became it. This is the sacred rampage, not loud, but unstoppable. Thank you for journeying through this transformative exploration of inner power, imagination, and the law of assumption. May these truths ignite a lasting shift within you, where love is not a distant dream, but a living reality you command through your state of being. If this message resonated, share it, live it, and let your world reflect the love you've dared to assume.